The British Matilda rarely takes center stage in wartime chronicles. Yet crews across the Commonwealth fought in these slow, peculiar tanks from the early years of World War II to its very end. When Vickers engineers designed it, they drew heavily on lessons from the long-gone First World War. Yet remarkably, they still nailed it. The Matilda turned out to be relevant even as the nature of warfare evolved dramatically. The first Matilda appeared in the early 1930s, a compact and inexpensive tank with respectable armor but armed only with a machine gun. It soon became clear, however, that another major war was looming, and such characteristics would no longer suffice. The Matilda II was nearly 15 tons heavier, but finally became a fully fledged tank. Armor thickness reached 60 millimeters in the front and 50 millimeters along the sides. By interwar standards, the Matilda was a true rolling fortress, even if painfully slow. The single 100-horsepower diesel inherited from the A7 medium tank was hopelessly underpowered, so British designers paired two AEC bus engines to compensate. The tank was also upgraded with a proper cannon, the 2-pounder, a fast-firing and easy-to-handle gun. At the time, however, its ammunition lacked a high-explosive shell effective against infantry. Although Vickers prepared the Matilda II for production as early as 1937, Britain only had two production vehicles by the start of the war. Its complex design, especially the sharply angled cast nose, made it rather difficult to manufacture in large numbers. Despite that, production was urgently accelerated, and by the spring of 1940, dozens of Matildas were deployed in France. In many ways, this infantry tank broadly resembled the Soviet KV, nearly invulnerable to the guns of early Panzer models, but neither fast nor well-armed. Still, the Matilda had enough potential to keep it viable through the early years of the war. Over time, its flaws were addressed, and from the Mark IV onward, the tank earned a reputation for reliability. Matildas fought in Europe, North Africa, and on the Eastern Front, where the Soviet Union received many of them through the Lend-Lease program. Later production batches featured an improved pair of engines, and high-explosive shells were finally added to the 2-pounder's arsenal. Even so, the engines remained underpowered, and the gun gradually became obsolete, while rearmament projects never progressed beyond paper or limited series production. You can also take the Matilda into battle in War Thunder. While its three variants are not as drastically different as various Shermans or T-34s, each has its own distinguishing traits. In the British tech tree at rank 2, you'll find the standard Matilda III, also known as the Mark II-A. Alongside it are two rare vehicles, the Australian Hedgehog variant and an experimental Soviet version. Just like in real life, one of the Matilda's defining strengths is its armor. It shrugs off shells from early Panzers, Soviet light tanks like the T-80, and American Stuarts. This protection comes at the cost of speed, but despite its toughness, the Matilda isn't really a defensive hull-down tank. It shines as a slow, methodical assault vehicle. The Matilda III features pretty strong frontal armor and a twin-engine setup, producing a combined 190 horsepower. It can reach 24 kilometers even off-road, eventually. Reverse is limited to about 4 kilometers an hour, though you're unlikely to need it often. The tank's armor layout is quite complex. A 75mm flattened frontal plate is nearly impervious to shells from tanks with a battle rating of 2.0 or 2.3, except for tank destroyers such as the Martyr. The turret is similarly resilient, with thick angled sides and a 70mm gun mantlet. The Matilda's main weakness is its gun. The 2-pounder cannot penetrate certain opponents unless you aim for their weak spots, such as the turret cheeks of Panzer IVs and the driver's port, or the area around the mantlet, of the Stu-H-42. Lightly armored but big crew vehicles like the T-28 may require several hits. It's best to look for flattened armor surfaces or engage your target from a higher position, which helps to reduce your enemy's armor angling. Keep in mind that it often takes the Matilda 2 or more shots to knock out a single opponent. Side shots are ideal, And for anti-aircraft vehicles, you'll want to carry some HE shells, or at least AP rounds with explosive filler. The ones that don't perform well against armor, but still have an explosive surprise inside. The Soviet experimental variant, equipped with a 76mm gun, offers a completely different experience. Its shells have excellent penetration and deal decent damage after piercing enemy defenses. However, the gun has almost no depression, and the tank faces more dangerous opponents. This makes the Soviet Matilda best suited for urban combat as a well-armored tank destroyer. Another special variant, the Australian Matilda Hedgehog, is distinguished by its signature rocket launcher system. Its gun sight includes a special marker that lets you fire rockets accurately at targets up to 220 meters away. This makes direct fire much easier than with the typical World War II-era Soviet rocket launchers. The Hedgehog can, for example, reliably hit a capture zone or finish off crippled or slow-moving enemies. By the second half of the war, the Matilda II was largely outdated. Soviet and British forces withdrew most of their Matildas from frontline service, leaving only the Australians who kept employing them in the Pacific theater. Inspired by the First World War tank doctrine, this infantry tank nevertheless proved to be a reliable and effective vehicle, one that saved many crews and played a meaningful role in defeating the Axis powers. In War Thunder, the Matilda has long stood out as one of the earliest heavy tanks, and one of the game's first quintessentially British vehicles. Do you enjoy fighting in this infantry tank? Tell us in the comments down below.